Hello, it's Dawn Michelle and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be taking a look at my entire, I think, there could be more dice running around somewhere else in this house, but I think this is my entire dice collection, and I'm going to share with you the dice that I specifically pair up with certain tarot decks. So if you are new to the dice casting system or have been a long-term dice goblin, like myself, hopefully this will be a fun one for you. I am going to start this out with a little bit of a I'm not going to say it's a rant, but there is an aesthetic layer to this practice of combining dice and decks, right? Because I'm going to combine dice that actually match the decks aesthetically. But I also want to point out that dice, kind of similar to cardstock, they each have their own feel. They're made of different materials. They all roll differently. They all feel differently in the hand. So the experience of working with dice is a very tactile experience in general. It's very similar to working with cards. Cards are very tactile. Each cardstock feels different in the hand. They shuffle differently. They act differently. They bend differently. They flex differently. The same thing with dice. They're not flexing and bending, but they all roll differently. They feel differently in the hand. Some are lightweight, kind of what we call like a sloppy roll. They just kind of roll and roll and roll and they take forever to land. Some are a bit heavier and they really just kind of plunk down. And there's a whole tactile experience to dice casting as well as the aesthetics. So I just kind of wanted to point that out because a lot of what I am going to be talking about today is like, look, this dice set matches this deck. However, there's also the whole under layer going on of how a dice set rolls, feels in the hand, and I'll try to mention that as we go through, but a lot of it is I've kind of worked over the last few months to pair dice and deck sets more aesthetically than anything else, but I have had several pairs that I've swapped around because the set of dice just didn't feel energetically like it matched the deck. And this is something that it's a very personal experience, and it's a very like you have to have it in your hand in order to feel what a dice feels like, right? Like it's like you can't really know a shuffle of a deck until you get it in your hands and you shuffle it yourself. You can watch videos all day long on it, but until you actually riffle that deck yourself, will you know exactly how it feels in a riffle. Same with casting a set of dice. So I just want to kind of put that out there before we jump in. We're definitely going to be talking mostly about aesthetics, but there is that underlayer of the actual tactile and energetic experience of casting the dice sets as well. So I'm going to try to make some sense of this. We're going to start with the dice and deck combos. Then I'm going to show you just kind of the extra loose dice that I have laying around, and then we're going to end with my actual D&D dice. For the most part, I don't use my D&D dice for tarot and divination work. Those generally exist in a different kind of space for me, although I do have one set that kind of crosses over from time to time. So let's talk about dice storage because I have kind of a variety of different options in how I store my dice sets. So I have several of these boxes. There's several by several different brands. There's the felt lid, which you can cast in, and this is primarily what I use. You can cast in the middle too, but it's a much smaller space. I prefer to cast in something that's a little bit wider. Generally using a dice tray is great because otherwise if you're just drop casting on a table, the dice can fly everywhere. And I have lost dice before that way. Like legit, they just go into the ether. I don't know where they went, they're just gone. So I almost always cast in a dice tray. I do have several other, I have some fancy wooden boxes too. I'll be honest, I actually just prefer these. They're like kind of inexpensive, cheap on Amazon. I feel like I can use and abuse them just fine. Inside this particular box, so I have 4 of these specific boxes, and inside this particular one I have a specific set of dice. Other things that I use for dice storage are these little glass jars. These kind of hold specific dice for specific things. I don't store all my dice in that. I have a dice bag, which we'll see here in a little bit, for all of my excess dice that I'm not currently working with. And occasionally I do keep dice in the containers they come in. We'll see this one here in a moment. I have these primarily, and each of these holds a specific set of dice, so I can kind of keep them together, kind of like a separate intention. So in this box, we have some of the dice that we're going to see here in conjunction with some different decks. Before we jump into that, I'll show you the 2 sets in here, I guess 3 sets in here, that don't necessarily relate to any sort of specific deck. These are just my general dice. These are obsidian. Again, different dice, different feel, different tactile experience. I don't know how well this is gonna go on camera because I feel like my camera is not focusing. So these ones are what I call my gamer dice. So they are little pixelated numbers, black obsidian. The numbers are all kind of hollow, and each of the ones and the highest number have a little symbol on them. Probably won't be able to tell it. That's a heart with a sword for the 6 on the D6. The D20 has a heart for the 20 and a game over, that way, game over for the 1. And a lot of these little fancy dice like this they have like cute little things, like there's a little apple on the top of that one for the 4. They all have something different on them. These are quite heavy. They are obsidian and like they have a very hefty roll to them. I love rolling with these. They're like kind of my just all around. If I don't know what dice I want to use, I tend to pull these out. I also pull them out for gameplay stuff that I'm doing a lot of the time. This is kind of just like my generic set, right? In addition to that, I also have this generic set. Now these are sharp edge dice, so they have very, very pointy corners, and they are much, much lighter than my obsidian ones. The obsidian gamer dice came from Your Wizards. I will try to leave links for the shops that I've bought things from. Most of my dice are actually just from Amazon. There's only a few specialty ones here. These ones are my liquid core dice that was given to me by Lisa for my birthday. So they are kind of, you know, special dice. I've used them in games. I've used them for casting. I don't know if it'll show up on camera, but when you shake a liquid core dice, they have swirlies, little liquid that moves inside. These ones are beautiful. They have a great sharp kind of roll to them because they're sharp edged. I have not filed them down or anything. You can very carefully with a nail buff file down edges. I think Lisa's talked about that before because she's done that with a few of her dice. These are also just kind of all around dice for me. I use them in a similar way to my gamer dice, where it's just kind of like if I need a set of dice, I go to one of these two. The last game that Lisa and I played, our Mean Girls game, I actually used these 2 dice because the 2 dice I was rolling previously were giving me low numbers. So I switched to these 2 sets of dice and they gave me high numbers. That's also a thing. Don't like the way a dice set is currently rolling? Grab a different one. It's kind of like cards in that way. Okay, also in here I have some astrology dice just for funsies. I think they're exactly the same. There's just 2 of them and they just have the astrology signs on them. So my first deck and dice set here is my Dreaming Way Tarot, which I'm sure will be no surprise to anybody to see on my channel. I love my Dreaming Way. Here's the backs. My dice actually match more, I think, the fronts than the backs because they have a very black and white sort of cohesive theme throughout the deck, particularly in a lot of the fabrics and things and the cups and things like that. And, you know, as you all know, like black and white's like my favorite. So the dice set that I have for this deck is this black and white one here, which has kind of some swirly patterns around it. I just felt like it really matched the energy of the cards, at least the front of the cards. Not so much the backs, but the backs aren't my favorite, so we're not gonna be matching those. I like to match the front of them. So let's just lay a couple cards out and then we'll just cast over the top for fun. I have no idea how to do this video, so this is what we're doing. I'll show you the dice, the deck, and then we'll just do a little casting over the top for the heck of it. But they look cute together, right? So these 2 are the sets that I use for just kind of everyday sort of mundane, any kind of reading in the moment, nothing really specific, just kind of a general daily reader dice and deck set. So my next dice and deck set is my B Tarot, which I use primarily for creative work. I have edged mine. I will try to like mention if I, you know, have edged and modified a deck or something. I've mentioned this deck before, I think in multiple monthly wrap-ups, because this is my kind of go-to deck right now for any sort of creative work. And I pair it with my, I can never remember the name of this dice set. It's either Fey Honey Wild or Fey Wild Honey. I will leave a link below for you. This is one of my favorite sets to roll. It's got this beautiful like kind of honey color with this purpley sheen inside. It's not liquid core. They're just nice kind of very rounded edges, very soft in the hand. They're very light for casting and they work really well with the B Tarot. So we'll just throw some cards down. do a little cast over the top. Try not to lose my dice. They work great. This casting method that I'm doing right this 5 minutes is actually a valid sort of casting method with the system, because I would be looking at specifically which dice land on the cards. We're just gonna go a little rabbit hole here. Which dice are landing on the cards. So these 3 dice I would relate to this King of Pentacles. This D20 I would relate to this 2 of Jars, and this percentile, which I would have to find the other one. This is right here. So I would put those together and those would go with this keeper here, and then I would have my D8 up here. So I would read that one on its own and I would read these others in alignment with these cards. So that is kind of the benefit to casting over the top of the cards. If you wanted to do that, you certainly could. Sorry, just I realized that in the mass amount of information that Lisa and I threw at you all in our dice casting videos, that was one of the things that I think both of us forgot to mention, is you can literally cast over the top of cards and use it like you would charms or runes or things like that and associate the cast with the card itself. So next we're gonna do a set of dice that I actually use with a couple of different decks. I've only pulled out 2 of them here. This particular set I keep in a glass jar. And this used to be a D&D set until I realized that, like, actually in game, this is very hard for me to read. But for dice divination, it works really well because I can pick it up and I can look at it. Nobody's waiting on me to take an action, right? This is a set of dice that has little skulls inside surrounded by moss, and they are clear with gold numbers. This I ordered, I think, off of Etsy like a long time ago. Same with these. These I actually also got. I'll just mention these really quickly. These have little mushrooms in them. Same kind of creation here. I think I bought them from the same shop. They have little mushrooms with moss and the gold numbers. These ones I don't really use for anything. They're just kind of like decorative at this point. These ones, my bone ones, have found a place with my decks here. Now, the main decks that I work with them are my Cursed Auguries Tarot. So this is definitely a deck that I cast my bone dice over the top of because it fits really well within the scope of this deck. Actually, the mushroom dice would go really well with this one too. Let's just throw a few down. See, beautiful with the bones and the apples and the sticks and the bugs and like there's bones in this deck too, but they work beautifully with this. I really enjoy it because even though these are hard for me to read, like I can pick it up and I can look at it, right? Nobody's waiting on me. So I tend to use this bone set here, the skull set, with my Cursed Auguries. And I also use it with pretty much all of my Black in the Moon decks, so the ones that are like from the creator of the Antique Anatomy. I have all of them in these beautiful Crystal Haven bags. This is my Memento Mori. Actually, I have my Patreon cards on top. There are bonus cards in here. This set is beautiful with my bone dice. Like this is the perfect match, right? Let me just pull a few down here. And I will use these dice with not only the Memento Mori, but my Oracle of Oddities. I have the 3 of them put together into one deck, and they work beautifully. I mean, look how gorgeous those are. Yes, are we talking about aesthetics? We absolutely are. But I feel like energetically also, like these dice all have little skulls in them. I feel like there's some energetic resonance between this. The colors match. Every card has kind of that black, gold, and green in it. Like these are just the perfect set of dice, I think, for all of my Black in the Moon decks. The Antique Anatomy, the Memento Mori, and the Oracle of Oddities, they just work together really, really well. I mean, the backs are pretty with them too, but again, we're looking at kind of energetic. These ones, again, are soft cornered. They're light. They're very easy to cast. They're not quite as sloppy of a roll as some of the Amazon dice, even though they're very, very rounded, because I think they have a little bit more weight to them because of all the stuff inside. So I really like the way that these cast as well. So the next deck and dice combo is actually my newest. My bin is upside down. This is my Tarot de Carlotides. Again, nobody will be surprised to see this deck on my channel. I'm actually going to leave them upside down for a minute because this is my newest set of dice, and I do keep them in their container, not only because the container is beautiful. I bought these on Amazon, but they are metal dice. And metal dice are quite a bit heavier, and they definitely have some sharp edges going on. you do not really want to store your metal dice with anything else. They kind of need to be kept separately, which is why I keep them in their little bin here, because then I make sure that not only are they protected, but anything that I've got around them would be protected too. Like I wouldn't want to put my metal dice in with any of my plastic resins or any of my my obsidian dice. They will scratch. That's another reason why any sort of heavy stone dice also you kind of don't want to have just like loose in a bag. You kind of want them to have their own sort of space so they don't rub up against other dice and scratch them. This is really hard to do. They have these gray metal and they have these pink flowers on them with the white numbers. These are a very heavy cast. I actually wouldn't even cast these over the top of my cards. So as you saw me do with the other decks, like that's not something I would do with these. So again, Tarot de Carlotides. I know you've all seen this deck. This again is another one that I just use for sort of everyday sort of readings, like nothing particular, just I need a reading, I need to do some work on some things, so I pull this deck out. Again, because of the weight and these being sharp edge and metal, I would not cast these over the top of my cards because I wouldn't want to have any damage on them. So I would definitely be grabbing a lid. They're also very sharp in the hand, so I tend to not do the shake a lot. I kind of just do the mix up this way because just giving them a vigorous shake in my hand, I will get poked. And they have a very heavy, hard kind of roll to them. Also, I rolled a nat 1 on my d20. So like these dice have a little bit of an attitude. And that's kind of funny. When we talk about like decks having personality, I swear my dice have personality too. Sometimes they get really pissy with me and they don't want to roll right. Sometimes they'll throw nothing but low numbers at me or high if I'm looking for low numbers. I've got 2 1s right here. Anyway, these are beautiful. I really enjoy working with them. They are very weighty, very heavy. They have a very hefty roll to them. Again, definitely ones that I would be rolling in some sort of tray and then I would be pulling them out and doing them alongside my reading, right? They look beautiful with the Tarot de Carlotides. I feel like they have a similar energy because they're really beautiful dice, but also like there's a lot of substance to them. And I feel like that's the same with the Tarot de Carlotides. I feel like people look at this deck and it just surface level, it just looks like it's just a fun read. And it really is just a fun read. But like, honestly, I can do really deep readings with this deck and there's so much more going on beneath the surface of this deck and oftentimes beneath the surface of the readings. And I feel like these dice really resonate with that same kind of energy because they're heavy, because there's a lot to them, there's a lot of substance, but they're also really beautiful. So I feel like the energetic properties of the dice actually match the deck as well. Let's take a look at a couple sets that I use for both divination and gameplay. This is my set of Dark Urge Astarian dice / light and shadow, because that is definitely how I work with them. I have decorated this box. You put little blood drips down it. In here, oh, this one has red, so it's beautiful. I work with these dice in alignment with these 2 decks. I've talked about it many, many times. I forgot the Oracle deck. It's just sitting over here on my shelf. Okay, so I pulled the dice out. I'm just gonna share with you what each one of them are. These are all Amazon dice, and I think I bought them in various sets. This is my Astarian dice, so they're just red and white with gold. I use them with my Notoria when I'm doing readings around that. They are not the dice that I use in Lisa and I's co-games, but they are dice that I use in my personal games. So I have a different set of Astarian dice for our co-games, but these ones are my Astarian dice / light. Then for shadow, I use these red and black with the gold lettering ones. This is my Dark Urge dice, also my shadow dice, and they go with the Goetia, which is a deck that I use for Dark Urge things, or which is game related, or shadow work. Then I have my, what we call our Bloody Kisses dice, and this one I use in conjunction mostly with the Oracle deck, and then these are the black and gold ones. If I need to roll again on a certain dice card combo, I will use these to act as a clarifier. This is my Notoria, aka boyfriend deck. I use this deck for like 100 different things. I'm sure y'all are sick of seeing this one. Here's the backs. This one again is the deck that I use with these dice here, which just one of them always wants to get away from me. I will not go on and on about this deck again. It is boyfriend deck. I use it for readings around that energy. I use it in our Monster Monsters and Mayhem game whenever I'm pulling cards for Astarion. And then I also use it as the light aspect in my light and shadow readings. I love this deck. It's so multifunctional. I'm not a fan of the cardstock, but like the deck itself is beautiful and my dice that go with it are fantastic. Then we have the Goetia. The other deck I don't have out here that I use in this configuration or with this particular work is my Diablo Tarot. And again, I've talked about that one at length too. It doesn't necessarily have a specific dice set that goes with it. It just kind of sits in alignment with all of these. So I didn't pull it out specifically. This is my Dark Urge deck and also my Shadow deck. And I use these dice with it. The black with the pop of red and the gold. This is a deck that I use primarily for shadow work or whenever I am doing Dark Urge related game stuff. Also, it works really well for that. I do primarily use this one in actual divination though. I don't often pull it into game very much, but it works great for a shadow deck, and then putting this with the Notoria is amazing. Okay, then finally we have the Citadel Oracle, which is a fairly new one to my collection that I've been playing with and adding into this particular set here, and it works great. Sometimes I use the Bloody Kisses dice with it because it does actually work well, and sometimes I use the Clarifier, the black and gold ones. This is a great deck. I really love this one. It's a very clear reader. It works really well for adding some energies that don't bring a lot of emotional undercurrent to them, right? It's kind of, I was gonna say basic, that's not what I mean. It's very middle of the road. And so it works great when I'm adding it in with Notoria, Goetia, Diablo. Those are very, very emotionally charged decks a lot of the time. And so adding this in to add a little bit of a neutral energy into the reading works really great. Let me just show you really quickly. Just pull these out. Now I would be doing like huge spreads with these. I have lots of cards and decks. So the primary dice that I would be using would be to cast over here on this one, cast over here on this one, and then these get cast here on this one in the center. And I can do a full reading using multiple sets of dice. There's various ways that I do this. I have kind of my own version of the dice casting system where I kind of play with the dice and what they mean. Sometimes I layer up, sometimes I cast multiple dice on one card, sometimes I cast multiple cards and dice in one position. And depending on what kind of energy I'm looking for and what kind of message I'm trying to get at is how I work with these ones in particular. But again, it's very fluid, it's a very flexible system. Again, I would also have my Diablo Tarot in here because that is almost always my center point, like big Diablo right in the center. Again, I've talked about that before, so I won't pull that out. If I am casting on top of my Diablo, I tend to just use these ones. So I do technically have a set of dice for it, but these ones are the ones that I use together, and I do primarily work with these all together. So talking about games and dice, again, I do use these for divination as well, particularly the Eldritch Overload. I love this deck. We'll take a look at it here in a minute. But this is my box of dice that I use for Monsters and Mayhem, which is a game that Lisa and I play, Baldur's Gate 3 live stream. I've decorated this box too. I know I've shown you all these many times before. This one has the purple lid inside, which is great. I have some notes for our game. I have a little skull here. This is my fidget. Sometimes I play with that. And then in here, I have my different dice for different things. In that game, I currently am playing my character and I have Astarion in party. So when I'm pulling a deck for him, I'm using Notoria. So I didn't get that out because we already looked at that. We'll talk about these ones first because these ones I'm not actively using. These are more I got for our next game, our next Monsters and Mayhem run. So we'll be doing that game again because we have a whole thing we're doing with it. And these ones, they're not liquid core. They kind of look like it. They are sharp edged and they're not the greatest rollers, so we'll have to see if I end up using them. I just like that they have this kind of purpley blue sparkly thing with the neon green. The D20 also has a death head moth on it, if I can find it, which is really cool. Probably won't show up on camera, but these ones I bought for our next game because in this game currently I only have me and Astarion in my party. So the dice I've been primarily using in the Monsters and Mayhem game, I will mention this one. I do have this black and purple set. I was using it in also these two dice sets that we'll see here in a minute in Lisa and I's Mean Girls game because we were rolling D20s in that as well. And this was my set for Gale. They didn't roll so well last time, so I ended up swapping them out, but I will probably probably try them again because this really matches, and this is my Gale set. If you know the characters, you know. This is the set that I use. It's just black and red that I use when I roll with the Astarion for his rolls, anything he has going on in game. And I pair this with the Notoria deck for when I have to pull cards for combat for him. And then my own personal for my character, which is Jinx. This is her set of dice currently. I say currently because she has another set that I'm super excited about coming. This is just a kind of black with silver specks in it, and it has the teal color. And she started off being colorful and went just black and teal because me and colors, sometimes we just don't get along. And then that's the dice that I use for her when I roll. And then the cards that I use when I am in combat with her is the Eldritch Overload. I love this deck. This is also a deck that I use for divination too. It's not just a gaming deck because I absolutely love it. It is like D&D meets cyberpunk, and it's blingy, and I've mentioned it before, like I really shouldn't like it because it's blingy and it's really colorful, but I absolutely love this deck and I love the way it reads. Look, there's the Oblivia card. I'll be honest, I tend to just pull out whatever dice set feels right in the moment when I'm casting with these cards and doing dice divination. So in game, I use this dice and deck combo, but when I'm doing divination, I tend to use whatever dice I have on hand and feels right in the moment. I don't often use my Jinx dice for divination. Sometimes I'm kind of funny about like dice has certain, it's like cards, it has a certain energy, it has a certain job, and these are Jinx's dice. And so I really only use them for her. They don't get used for much else. So now we're gonna move into dice and decks that I use for specific practices. Some of this is fairly new to me in terms of this little grouping that I have right here. I do have my Tarot Persephone's Garden, and then I have my Darkness of Light. So these two decks for me, this deck I use when I work with Persephone as a divine feminine deity, and this is my Hades deck. So when I work with Hades energy or Hades as a divine masculine energy. This is a new thing in my practice. I just got this edition of the Darkness of Light back in. I had it before. I hated the cardstock. I rehomed it. This is beautiful linen. I love it. I've been playing with it a little bit, but again, this is very new. The Persephone's Garden I've had for a couple months now, and I've been working with some very specific dice with this. So these I keep in these little glass jars because they sit in kind of an altar space that I have for Persephone and Hades. So pulling these out, these are my Persephone dice, which I have shown before. They just came out of an Amazon set. They are beautiful black with kind of this pink, red, magenta mix going on with the gold lettering. And although maybe not necessarily matches the back that well, I feel like they really match the fronts. And again, it's about the energy. These are a very soft roll. They're a soft edge. They feel nice in the hand. They're comfortable to hold and work with. They cast really well. They've got a great roll to them. On the flip side of that, I have my brand new Hades dice, which are, again, I also got off Amazon. They are kind of this clear with a black throughout. These are sharp edge dice. They are not great to hold. They are a little bit large and awkward in my hand, and they are very pokey, and they make me a little bit uncomfortable. So talking about the energy of the dice with the energy of the deck and the thing that I'm working with it, this feels fitting for Hades energy for me, right? It's a little bit uncomfortable. It's a little bit sharp. It's a little bit pokey. It works really well with the Darkness of Light. So this is my Hades deck now. Again, I had this deck before. I think I used it just kind of as a general reader. I rehomed it because I had some other decks that I was gravitating toward more at the time. And it really was a cardstock issue. Previously, I didn't like it. This is beautiful linen. And now that I have this, like, this is my Hades deck. This will always be my Hades deck. This will always be just dedicated to that particular work and that particular god. And then the Tarot of Persephone's Garden is, I know I've talked about it quite a bit lately. It's definitely a love of mine right now. I work with it a lot. And these two together are really amazing. I just did a video for my members where I created a Wither and Bloom reading with these two decks together. And we'll just do a quick little, let's see it all in action here. I'm gonna pull two Persephone cards and we'll pull two Hades. And I worked with these as Wither and Bloom and then, did some casting. I'm gonna light cast over the top of these As you can see in just the way that I also cast them, I cast them very low. The Persephone dice stayed together in a cluster. They didn't roll very far. They were very soft land. Again, I'm getting really into the nerdiness of this all. Whereas the Hades dice, you can see they spread out more. They push themselves away from each other. And I always think that's really interesting, particularly when we're looking at pairing dice with cards in a divination context, right? So this tells me something too, right? The fact that these are all clustered together and they're tight, they're grouped, they're kind of supporting each other, and these are all like kind of more spread out. They actually pushed each other away as I cast them. So that's a really interesting layer that I add to my readings when I'm working with dice and decks together, is I'm also looking at, particularly if I cast on top of cards, which I know I said I don't do very often. If I do cast over cards, I pay particular attention to that. Even when I'm casting in a dice tray, I will pay attention to that as well. Like, are they all spread out really well, or are they grouped together, and which numbers are grouped together, which dice are grouped together, like how did they actually land? It's kind of similar to charm casting in that way, where you can use the position as well to give you some context around the work that you're doing with the dice and the decks. And I'll tell you, even getting my Hades dice back in here, sometimes they're a little finicky. But man, do they fill the space. So the next set of dice that I'm gonna share with you are dice that I use in my fellowship. So that's the guided tarot adventure that we're doing in my membership this year, and this is my current box. The dice that are in here change monthly. I again can cast on the top of this. I've talked about what's in this box many times, so since we're just sharing kind of the dice themselves, I'll just talk about that. I do still have all the same dice in here that I had last month because we are still in the same general region and I'm using similar decks, so I've kept my dice the same. I'll just pull out a few here. These are just some red and gold, kind of a little bit shinier red and gold that I use. I talked about using these last month. Again, same with these. These are just kind of some a little bit darker, kind of like red magenta, tend to look more red in some light and more magenta in others, which is kind of cool. And they have the gold lettering. Again, just very soft edge dice. Then I have the white ones here, just kind of this pearlescent with the gold letters that I'm currently using with my companion. And then I have my black and white ones here, which I am using with my guardian. I do pull these ones out on occasion for other things. They work really well. You saw me use them with the Wild Unknown. This is my Astarian bag. Like, y'all, I have no excuses. I added a charm. I added a pin that says Astarian approves. This is made out of fabric to match his starting armor in the game, and I just had to have it. This is a thing. You can find these dice pouches all over Etsy. I do believe Peggy is making some now, which is amazing. So in here I keep kind of my fellowship dice, so dice that I've used throughout the fellowship. If you've watched my monthly practice videos, you probably recognize some of them. I have some pink and blue swirly ones here. These are some black, ooh, let's not mix them up. Black swirly with some gold lettering. I have purple with gold lettering. I feel like those would be good Gale dice too. That one's empty because it's currently in my box. This is a blue, and I actually have two of these you'll see in here. Neon blue. I've used this one with the Eldritch Overload a lot. Then we have a green, dark green, and gold set here. Then we have this kind of blue and brown with the white lettering. I used this one when we were on the coast. This is a black and green set. I've used this one also with the Tarot de Carlotides. Are we back around? We are back around. And then in here, I also have my green set. I have used these in actual game stuff too as well, because these are sometimes I pull out for my, as I call them, my poison dice. I have the black and yellow ones. I have occasionally used these with the BU Tarot as well, but it's just an extra set. I did find a kind of pink set. After I said in my last video that I didn't have a pink set, I ended up finding the other set for my Tarot de Carlotides, but now I do have a pink set in here. And then I have the extra, this one should be, sometimes you get wayward dice. This one should be somewhere. I don't know where these dice currently are. I do have a set somewhere of gray and gold. They're not in here. And then I have just an extra set of the blue and the neon blue and black just because they came with it. But what I do is swap these out around. If I get new sets of dice that I like better, because these are just all cheapy Amazons, I'll take some out, I'll put some in. This is kind of just like my overflow, and also where I keep all of the dice that I use for fellowship that aren't currently active in my practice because they don't necessarily resonate with the energy that I got going on, and they just sit with everything else. So yeah, that's just all my extra dice that I keep in this bag. And again, like I said, I swap them out from time to time. If I get new sets that I like better, things like that, I'll swap them out for these. Okay, let's wrap things up with my actual D&D dice. This is my rogue dice. So when I have a rogue that I get to play on occasion, and this is the dice that I use for them. They're kind of like a purpley black swirly with silver letters. These are actually from the Critical Role shop, so these are actually the Percy collection of dice. And then in this little bag I have my actual D&D set of things. This is my Druid set, so this is a trimmed copy of the Wildwood Tarot, which I do actually use in game. I should probably just cut the bottoms off because we don't really use the titles. We more work on the off the artwork and read them intuitively in alignment with what's going on in the game. And then in here, I have my various sets of dice. This is my main set of dice that I use for my Druid for kind of just like everything. It is also from the Critical Role shop, and it is the Keyleth set. So it's this brown green with the gold lettering. Beautiful. I love the way the Critical Role sets roll. They have a really nice soft dice to hold and to work with, but they have a really great roll. I have this backup set. This is my backup set for when this set misbehaves. This is my backup set, which is just a green and gold. I think these ones came off Amazon. They're like nothing special. And then for battle and things of that nature, unless I'm doing heals, this is a whole thing, right? It's a whole thing. General gameplay and heals is this set, and then battle damage is my bone set here. They're not actual bone, they're just painted to look like bone. And I love these. These work really well too. These have a great roll too. So that is my actual set of D&D. For the most part, I don't use these for divination. These really are just for D&D, just for that specific character that I'm playing. So kind of like when I was talking about with my Jinx dice, I don't use my Jinx dice for other things. They are her dice. This is my Druid's dice set. So I really don't, and deck. I have another copy of the Wildwood that I use for divination. This particular one is specific for her and her set. So there we have it. That is my full dice collection. I do believe clearly there's a set of gray dice running around here somewhere. I might have lent it to the kids, but outside of that, this should be my full collection of the dice, the decks that I specifically work with certain dice, decks that I use for certain things, dice that I use for gameplay, dice that I use for divination, all the dice and card goodness. I would love to know if you are integrating dice into your divination, how that's going. What dice do you have? Do you have certain decks that you pair them with? Like if you got a channel, like make a video, that would be great. Dice and deck pairings, like let's make that a thing. I'm totally on board for that. If you are in my membership, can share in the Discord. I'm also on Instagram, love to see pictures there. So definitely share with me all of the dice and deck goodness. This is a huge part of my practice now, if you hadn't guessed, and I'm really excited to finally be able to share it in a bit more detail. I am sharing more personal side of things in my membership, but I'm happy to share more about the kind of the hows and the whys here in this public space as well. And if you have any questions about the dice and decks or dice casting in general, definitely feel free to let me know in the comments below. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can around it. If you are interested in working with dice and decks more in a gaming / practice sort of way, definitely check out the fellowship. Also, just keep an eye out in my spaces because there's things in the works. There's always things in the works, of course, but there's some very specific things in the works that I'm very, very excited about. So in the meantime, definitely share with me all the dice and deck goodness. I want to hear about it and see it all. In the meantime, you'll find links for everything I've shown here that I can link in the description box of this video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I look forward to sharing with you again soon.